I remember the day everything changed. It started as an ordinary Tuesday, the kind where life hums along quietly, and the biggest decision I faced was whether to order pizza or cook dinner. My name is David, and I've been married to Emily for 7 years. We had built a life together that felt stable, happy even, 2 dogs, a modest home in a suburban neighborhood, and a shared passion for culinary adventures. Emily was the heart of our home, always experimenting with new recipes, and her laughter filled the kitchen as we cooked side by side. It was a dance we had perfected over the years, a rhythm of love and companionship. Then there was Marco, the famous chef who owned a trendy restaurant downtown. His name was often mentioned in the same breath as culinary masterpieces and television appearances. I admired his work from afar, always excited when Emily suggested we go out for dinner at his place. It was a special treat, one that we looked forward to. Little did I know that my admiration would soon turn into a source of pain. In hindsight, there were signs. Emily had become more secretive about her phone, always texting under the table, her smile a little too bright when she mentioned Marco's restaurant. I brushed off the instinctual nagging at the back of my mind, convinced that I was being paranoid. After all, we had a good marriage, didn't we? We laughed together, shared dreams, and supported each other through life's ups and downs. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. Then came the night that shattered my world. I had planned a surprise dinner for Emily, believing that rekindling our romance would help us reconnect. I set the table, lit candles, and prepared her favorite dish. Just as I was plating the food, my phone buzzed. It was a text from a friend, someone who worked in the restaurant industry. The words were like a punch to the gut. "David, I think you should know. Emily has been seen with Marco. They were at his restaurant last night looking very close." My heart raced as I read and reread the message. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me, the kind that comes when you realize your world is about to crumble. I knew I had to confront her. I waited for her to come home, the uneaten dinner growing cold on the table as my thoughts spiraled into a dark abyss. When she walked in, her smile vanished as she saw my expression. "David, what's wrong?" she asked, her voice tinged with concern. I didn't respond right away. Instead, I pulled out my phone and showed her the message. The air in the room thickened, the silence stretching painfully between us. "Emily, is it true?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Her eyes darted away, and in that moment I knew. The truth hung between us like a noose, and she was the one who had tied the knot. "Tell me," I pressed, desperation clawing at my throat. She hesitated, her lips trembling as she finally admitted, "Yes, I've been seeing Marco. It just happened. I didn't mean for it to." Betrayal surged through me like a wildfire. How could she? The woman I loved, the one who had promised to stand by my side, had chosen another man. The anger bubbled up, mingling with heartbreak. I felt like a fool, all those moments of joy we shared now tainted by her infidelity. "Emily, how could you do this?" I demanded, my voice trembling with a mix of hurt and rage. "After everything we've built together." "I'm so sorry, David. I never wanted to hurt you," she pleaded, tears streaming down her face. But those words felt hollow, like an empty promise. I couldn't bear to look at her, not now, not after the trust had been shattered. As she stood there, sobbing, I felt a shift within me. The love I had for her was now intertwined with a deep sense of betrayal, and something darker began to stir. I had spent years building a life with her, and now I felt the urge for revenge bubbling beneath the surface. I wanted her to feel the weight of her actions, to understand the pain she had caused. I knew Marco had to pay for what he had done. The thought of his smug smile and the way he had stolen my wife only fueled my resolve. I would take action. This was more than just about Emily, it was about justice. And so, the wheels began to turn in my mind. The days following that confrontation were a blur of emotions. I vacillated between anger, heartbreak, and a simmering desire for revenge. Emily's apologies felt like salt on an open wound, and her attempts to reach out only pushed me further away. I stopped answering her calls and focused on the idea of what Marco had taken from me. The love I thought was unbreakable, the trust that had been the foundation of our marriage. I spent long nights staring at the ceiling, replaying memories of happier times. I remembered our first date at a quaint Italian bistro, the way her eyes lit up when I surprised her with a bouquet of her favorite flowers, the laughter we shared over homemade dinners. Those moments felt like a distant dream now, overshadowed by the reality of her betrayal. But as the days turned into weeks, one thought began to dominate my mind. Marco had to pay. I couldn't just sit back and let him continue to thrive, flaunting his success while he tore my life apart. I had to find a way to bring him down, to expose his true character to the world. The more I thought about it, the more justified I felt. I started my research into Marco's restaurant, Cucina Di Marco, a place that had garnered rave reviews and a loyal following. I'd always admired the culinary artistry, but now it felt like a den of thieves. I began to dig deeper, looking for any signs of wrongdoing. I remembered hearing whispers from friends in the industry about health violations, stories of unsanitary conditions and expired ingredients. It was time to investigate. I made a plan. I would visit the restaurant under the guise of a customer, observe everything and gather evidence. I wanted to see for myself what went on behind the kitchen doors. I waited for a Friday night when the restaurant would be bustling and slipped into a pair of slacks and a button-up shirt, trying to project an air of casual sophistication. As I entered Cucina Di Marco, the atmosphere was electric. The clinking of glasses, the laughter of patrons, and the aromas wafting from the kitchen created a vibrant scene. I took a seat at the bar, my heart racing as I surveyed the room. Marco was in his element, darting between tables, charming customers with his charisma. I could see why Emily had been drawn to him. He had that magnetic quality, a confidence that oozed from his every move. I ordered a drink and watched as the staff worked tirelessly. They were clearly under pressure, and I noted the frantic pace of the kitchen. It was a well-oiled machine, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I paid close attention to the food being served, observing how it was prepared and the interactions between the chefs and waitstaff. After a while, I noticed a server being chastised by a sous chef for not plating a dish properly. The sous chef's voice was harsh, and I could see the fear in the server's eyes. It was a reminder of the toxic environment I had heard about, and I made a mental note to gather more information about the staff's treatment and any potential health violations. As the night progressed, I discreetly took photographs of the kitchen through a crack in the door, capturing images of the chaotic scene. I saw ingredients piled haphazardly, some looking suspiciously close to expiration. My heart raced as I realized I might have the evidence I needed. I was gaining momentum, and the thrill of my mission fueled my determination. I returned home that night, my mind racing with the details I had gathered. I started compiling my findings, making notes, and organizing the photos. I felt a sense of purpose. This was more than just revenge. It was about holding Marco accountable for his actions. He had invaded my life, and now I would invade his world. In the following days, I continued my investigation. I spoke to former employees, people who had worked in the restaurant and were willing to share their experiences. They recounted stories of unsanitary practices, expired food, and a general disregard for health codes. Each conversation solidified my resolve. I was building a case against Marco, one that would expose him for the fraud he truly was. I began to envision the moment I would report him. The thought of walking into that health department office, armed with evidence, made my heart race with anticipation. I would be the one to take him down, the one to reveal the truth. But with that anticipation came a twinge of doubt. Would this truly bring me the closure I sought? Would it erase the pain Emily had caused? I pushed those thoughts aside, focusing instead on the justice I felt was necessary. I had to see this through. As I prepared to take the next step, I couldn't help but wonder how Emily would react once she learned what I was planning. Would she feel remorse? Would she realize the gravity of her betrayal? It was time to move forward. The pieces were in place, and I was ready to execute my plan. Marco's days at the top were numbered, and I would make sure his next dish was his last. With my evidence gathering reaching its peak, I could feel the tension building within me. Each day brought me closer to a decision I knew would change everything, not just for Marco, but for Emily and me as well. The idea of reporting Marco to the health department felt like a double-edged sword. It was a chance for revenge, but it also felt like the final nail in the coffin of my marriage. As I continued to compile my findings, I realized I needed to be methodical. I put together a detailed report outlining the health violations I had documented, complete with photographs and testimonies from former employees. Each piece of evidence felt like a brick in a wall I was constructing. Against Marco, I wanted to ensure that when I walked into that office, I had everything I needed to make my case unassailable. One night, as I sat in my study surrounded by the scattered papers and notes, I was struck by a wave of doubt. I thought about Emily. Despite the betrayal, the memories of our life together still lingered like shadows in the corners of my mind. I could see her smile, hear her laughter, and feel the warmth of her embrace. I had loved her deeply, and part of me still did. But that love was now tainted by her choices, and I was left grappling with a cruel irony. The very thing that had brought us together, our love for food, was now the battleground for my revenge. I pushed those thoughts aside. I couldn't let sentimentality cloud my judgment. I had a mission, and I had to see it through. I spent hours researching the health codes and regulations that Marco's restaurant would be violating, making sure I understood the gravity of what I was about to unleash. I wanted to ensure that my report would lead to serious consequences, and I knew that health violations could be a serious blow to a restaurant's reputation. Finally, the day arrived when I felt ready to act. I had gathered enough evidence, and the adrenaline coursing through me was palpable. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what I was about to do. I drove to the local health department, my heart racing with a mix of excitement and apprehension. I parked the car and sat for a moment, staring at the building. This was it. As I walked inside, the sterile smell of the office hit me. The walls were painted a dull shade of beige and the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. I approached the front desk, my palms sweaty and my heart pounding. "I'd like to report a restaurant for health violations," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. The receptionist looked up at me, her expression neutral. "What restaurant?" "Cucina di Marco," I replied, the name burning in my throat like acid. "Do you have any evidence?" she asked, her tone professional but lacking warmth. I nodded and handed over my report, watching as she flipped through the pages. I could see her expression change as she glanced at the photographs. "This is quite serious," she said, her eyes narrowing. "Are you willing to provide a statement?" "Yes," I replied, feeling a mixture of relief and exhilaration. This was the moment I had been waiting for, the moment I could finally expose Marco for the fraud he was. As I recounted my findings to the health inspector, I felt a sense of power wash over me. I was no longer the victim. I was taking control of my narrative. I detailed everything I had witnessed, from unsanitary kitchen practices to the treatment of staff. The inspector took notes, nodding as I spoke, their expression growing more serious with each revelation. When I finished, the inspector leaned back in their chair, looking thoughtful. "We'll investigate this matter further. If what you've reported is accurate, this could lead to significant consequences for the restaurant." I left the health department feeling a rush of adrenaline. I had done it. I had taken the first step toward avenging the betrayal that had shattered my life. But as I drove home, a new wave of uncertainty washed over me. What would happen next? Would Marco's restaurant be shut down? Would Emily find out what I had done? The thought of her reaction lingered in my mind. Would she blame me for ruining Marco's life? Would she come to his defense, insisting that I was the villain in this story? I didn't know, but I was prepared to face whatever came next. In the following days, I watched the restaurant closely. I wanted to see the fallout from my actions, to witness the consequences of Marco's arrogance. I drove by Cucina di Marco every evening, observing the bustling crowds and the laughter that echoed from within. It felt surreal to know that I had planted the seeds of destruction in that vibrant atmosphere. Then, one afternoon, I received a call from the health department. "Mr. David, we've completed our investigation into Cucina di Marco," the inspector said. "We found multiple violations and we're issuing a citation. The restaurant will have to make significant changes to comply with health regulations. A rush of satisfaction surged through me. I had done it. I had taken down the man who had taken my wife. But as the initial high began to fade, I was left with an unsettling emptiness. What did this victory mean for me? Would it truly heal the wounds that Emily had inflicted? As I pondered these questions, I knew that I would have to confront Emily eventually. She would find out what I had done, and I had to be prepared for the storm that would follow. I was ready to face the consequences, whatever they may be. The days dragged on after I reported Marco, each one feeling heavier than the last. I found myself oscillating between a sense of triumph and an unsettling emptiness. The restaurant's citation had made headlines, and I could see the ripple effect of my actions. Marco's smug smile had been replaced by a look of disbelief, and the once bustling restaurant had begun to see a decline in customers. I felt a twisted sense of satisfaction as I watched the fallout from my car window, but it was quickly overshadowed by the inevitable confrontation with Emily that loomed on the horizon. I knew it was only a matter of time before she learned about my actions. I had taken a significant step, and I could almost hear the gears turning in her mind. Would she confront me? Would she try to defend Marco, the man who had betrayed our marriage? The thought made my stomach churn, but I steeled myself for the inevitable. I had to be prepared for whatever she might say. That evening, as I sat on the couch, the silence in the house was deafening. I could hear the ticking of the clock, each second a reminder of the tension that hung in the air. I glanced at my phone, half expecting a message from Emily, but nothing came. It was almost as if she were waiting for the right moment to strike, to challenge me on my actions. When she finally walked through the door, I could sense the shift in the atmosphere. She looked different, her eyes puffy and red from crying. It was clear that the weight of the affair was pressing down on her as heavily as it was on me. But I felt no sympathy, only the cold resolve that had driven me to take action against Marco. "David," she said, her voice shaky. "Can we talk?" I nodded, my heart hammering in my chest. This was it, the moment of reckoning. I watched as she moved closer, her expression a mix of vulnerability and defiance. "I heard about the citation," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "You reported Marco. I can't believe you would do something like that." "Believe it," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "He took everything from me, Emily, and you let him." She flinched at my words, the truth of them hitting her hard. "I know I hurt you," she said, tears streaming down her cheeks. "But this isn't going to fix anything. You're just making it worse." "Worse?" I echoed, feeling the heat rise in my chest. "You think this is about making it worse? You think I wanted to ruin his life? He ruined ours, Emily. You chose him over me." She opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. Instead, she turned away, wiping her tears with the back of her hand. "I didn't mean for it to happen," she said finally, her voice trembling. "It was a mistake. I was confused." "Confused?" I laughed bitterly. "You were confused. You didn't just trip and fall into an affair, Emily. You made a choice. You chose him." "I know," she admitted, her voice breaking. "I made a terrible mistake, but this is not the answer. You're just hurting yourself more." "Hurting myself?" I shot back. "I'm hurting because of what you did. I'm trying to take back control of my life, and you're here trying to guilt me into feeling sorry for you." "David, please," she pleaded, stepping closer to me. "I love you. I want to work this out, but you can't fix things by trying to destroy someone else." Her words hit me like a slap. Did she really think that love could erase the damage she had done? I searched her eyes for any sign of remorse, any recognition of the pain she had caused, but all I saw was desperation. It was infuriating. "Love," I scoffed. "You love me after what you did. You don't get to say that after sleeping with another man. You don't get to play the victim here." The tension in the room was palpable, thickening like fog. I could feel the emotional weight pressing down on me, suffocating. I had expected this confrontation to be cathartic, a moment of clarity where everything would be laid bare. Instead, it felt like a battle, and I was losing. "David, I'm so sorry," she said again, tears flowing freely now. "I never wanted to hurt you. I was caught up in something that spiraled out of control. Please, let's talk about this. Let's figure it out together." I shook my head, my resolve faltering. "You don't get it, do you? It's not just about you and me anymore. It's about trust, and you shattered that. You broke something that can't be fixed with apologies." She looked at me, her expression shifting from desperation to frustration. So you think ruining Marco's career will fix this? That's your solution? It's not just about him, I said, my voice rising. It's about making sure he understands the consequences of his actions. He can't just waltz in and take what's mine without any repercussions. David, this isn't you, she said, her voice softening. You're not a vengeful person. You're better than this. Maybe I'm not, I replied, feeling the anger bubble to the surface. Maybe you brought this out in me. Maybe I'm done being the nice guy who gets walked all over. Silence filled the room as we both stood there, caught in the storm of our emotions. I could see the hurt in her eyes, but it was overshadowed by the anger boiling inside me. It was hard to reconcile the woman I once loved with the one standing before me now, pleading for my understanding. I can't do this, I finally said, my voice shaky. I can't keep pretending that everything is okay when it's not. I need time to think. With that, I turned and walked away, leaving her standing there, tears streaming down her face. I felt a mixture of guilt and relief as I retreated to the solitude of my study. The confrontation had only deepened the wounds, and I knew I had to be careful about where I went from here. As I sat in the dim light of my study, I realized I was at a crossroads. I had taken action against Marco, but what did that mean for my relationship with Emily? Was revenge truly the answer, or was it just a way to mask the pain I felt? The thoughts swirled in my mind as I contemplated my next steps. I had to decide what kind of man I wanted to be moving forward. In the days that followed, the tension in our home became unbearable. Emily and I moved through the house like strangers, avoiding each other's gaze and conversations. The atmosphere was thick with unspoken words and unresolved feelings. I spent most of my time in my study, poring over the evidence I had collected against Marco, as if the act of digging deeper into his wrongdoings would somehow distract me from the emotional turmoil I was experiencing. I thought about the consequences of my actions. The health department had issued a citation, and Marco's restaurant was under scrutiny. He was facing potential fines and the threat of closure. Part of me reveled in the thought of his downfall, but another part of me was consumed by doubt. Was this really justice, or was it just a hollow victory? Emily's attempts to reach out became increasingly desperate. She would leave small notes on the kitchen counter, messages filled with apologies and pleas for understanding. I tried to ignore them, but each note felt like a dagger to my heart. I wanted to believe that we could work through this, but every time I looked at her, I was reminded of the betrayal. One evening, as I sat in my study, lost in thought, I heard the front door open. I glanced at the clock and realized it was late. Emily must have just returned from work. I steeled myself for another awkward encounter, but instead I heard her footsteps approach my study. "David," she called softly, knocking on the doorframe. "Can we talk?" I hesitated, weighing my options. I could ignore her, retreat further into my own thoughts, or I could face the music. I took a deep breath and nodded, gesturing for her to come in. She stepped inside, her expression cautious. "I've been thinking a lot about everything," she began, her voice trembling. "About us and what happened. I know I messed up and I'm so sorry." I remained silent, crossing my arms defensively. I wanted to hear her out, but the anger still simmered beneath the surface. "David, I realize now that I took our life for granted," she continued, her eyes welling with tears. "I didn't appreciate what we had until I almost lost it. I was foolish and selfish, and I regret every moment I spent with Marco." "Regret doesn't change what happened," I replied, my voice low and steady. "You made a choice, Emily. You chose him over me, and that's something I can't just forget." "I know, and I don't expect you to forgive me right away," she said, wiping her tears. "But I want to try to make things right. I love you, David. I want to fight for our marriage." Her words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of our shared history. Part of me wanted to believe her, to reach out and hold her, but the other part of me felt the sting of betrayal. Could I really trust her again? "I don't know if I can," I admitted, my voice breaking. "You've shattered my trust, and it's going to take time to rebuild it. I need to understand why this happened in the first place." "I was feeling lost," she confessed, her voice thick with emotion. "I thought I could find excitement and validation in someone else, but I was wrong. Marco was a mistake, a moment of weakness. You're the one I want to be with, and I'll do whatever it takes to prove it." I looked into her eyes, searching for sincerity. I could see the pain etched on her face, but the memories of her betrayal were still fresh in my mind. You say you want to prove it, but how can I trust that this won't happen again? What's to stop you from making the same choice? I don't know, she replied, her voice shaking. But I'm willing to go to counseling. I want us to work through this together. I need to understand why I did this, and I want to show you that I can change. The thought of counseling felt like a lifeline, but it also felt like a daunting task. Could we really unravel the threads of our relationship and weave them back together? I wanted to believe it was possible, but the road ahead felt uncertain and fraught with challenges. I'll think about it, I said finally, wanting to give her a glimmer of hope while I processed my own feelings. But I need time. I need to figure out what I want. She nodded, her expression a mixture of relief and sadness. I understand. Just know that I'm here ready to fight for us. I'll wait as long as it takes. As she left the room, I felt a wave of conflicting emotions crash over me. I wanted to believe in the possibility of healing, but I also felt the weight of anger and hurt. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was standing at a crossroads, and the choices I made in the coming weeks would determine the course of my life. The next few days were a whirlwind of emotions. I continued to follow the developments surrounding Marco's restaurant, and I could see the toll it was taking on him. The once bustling establishment was now quiet, and the staff seemed to be living in a state of uncertainty. I felt a pang of guilt as I watched the fallout unfold, but it was quickly overshadowed by the anger I felt toward him. Then, one evening, I received a call from a number I didn't recognize. "David, it's Marco," the voice on the other end said, a hint of desperation lacing his tone. "I need to talk to you." I felt a surge of adrenaline as I listened to his request. "Why would I want to talk to you?" I asked, my voice cold and unyielding. "I know what you did," he said, his voice steady, "and I want to explain my side of the story. I think you deserve to hear it." I hesitated, weighing my options. Did I really want to engage with the man who had betrayed me? But as I considered the possibility of gaining insight into his mindset, a part of me felt compelled to hear him out. "Fine," I replied, my heart racing. "Let's meet." The following evening, I found myself sitting across from Marco at a small cafe. He looked different, haggard and worn, the weight of his recent troubles etched into his features. "Thank you for meeting me," he said, his voice low. "I know this is awkward, but I wanted to clear the air." "Clear the air," I echoed, my skepticism evident. "You think you can just waltz in here and explain away what happened?" "I don't expect you to forgive me," he admitted, running a hand through his hair. "But I owe it to you to be honest. Emily was a mistake and I never intended to hurt you. It just happened. Just happened," I scoffed. "You think that justifies your actions. You don't get to play the victim here." "I'm not trying to," he said, his voice earnest. "I regret what happened. I've lost everything, my reputation, my restaurant. I know it's my fault, but I want you to understand that it was never my intention to come between you and Emily." As I listened to him speak, I felt a mix of anger and confusion. Was he genuinely remorseful, or was this just another manipulation tactic? "I'm not here to make excuses," he continued. "I just wanted to express my regret. I never wanted to hurt either of you, and I know my actions have consequences." I leaned back in my chair, processing his words. Part of me wanted to lash out, to let him know how deeply he had hurt me, but another part of me recognized the vulnerability in his admission. "What do you want from me?" I asked finally. "Closure," he said simply. "I want you to know that. I'm sorry for what I did. I'm trying to rebuild my life, and I hope you can find it in your heart to move on too." I stared at him, the weight of his words hanging in the air. Did I have the strength to forgive, or would I forever be shackled by the anger and betrayal? "I'll think about it," I said, my voice steady. "But know this, trust is not something that can be easily rebuilt. You've caused irreparable damage, and I can't promise that I'll ever feel the same way about you again." With that, I stood up to leave, feeling a mixture of relief and uncertainty. I had confronted the man who had hurt me, and while it hadn't brought me the closure I had hoped for, it felt like a step forward in my journey. As I walked away from the cafe, I realized that I had a choice to make. I could let anger consume me, or I could begin to find a way to heal. I returned home, my mind racing with thoughts of Emily and Marco. The next few weeks would be crucial, and I had to decide what I wanted for my future. The days that followed my meeting with Marco were filled with reflection. I had confronted the man who had stolen my wife's affections, and while I hadn't walked away with the closure I sought, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. I knew that the path to healing wouldn't be easy, but it was a necessary step if I wanted to reclaim my life. Emily and I continued to navigate our fragile existence together. She had been waiting for me to make a decision, and I could see the hope in her eyes as I returned home that evening. I hadn't shared what had transpired between Marco and me. Part of me felt it was unnecessary, and another part feared how she might react. I needed to sort through my feelings first before involving her in the complexities of that conversation. One evening, as we sat across from each other at the dinner table, I finally mustered the courage to speak. "Emily, we need to talk about what happened between us. I've been thinking a lot about our future." Her eyes widened and she set down her fork. "I'm listening," she said, her voice steady but tinged with nervousness. "I know I've been angry," I began, my heart racing. "But I've also realized that holding onto that anger isn't going to help either of us. I want to move forward, but it's going to take work." "I'm willing to do whatever it takes," she replied, sincerity etched into her features. "I want to rebuild our trust, David. I want to go to counseling together and figure this out." I nodded, appreciating her willingness to confront the issues head-on. "I think that's a good idea. We need to address the root of the problems in our relationship and understand why this happened in the first place." Emily reached across the table and took my hand, her touch warm and reassuring. "Thank you for being willing to try. I know I've hurt you, and I'll do everything I can to show you that I'm committed to making this work." As we sat there, holding hands, I felt a flicker of hope. Perhaps we could rebuild what had been broken. It wouldn't be easy, and I knew there would be days when the shadows of betrayal would loom large. But I was willing to try. I wanted to believe in the possibility of healing, not just for Emily and me, but for myself as well. In the weeks that followed, we began attending couples counseling. The sessions were challenging, forcing us to confront uncomfortable truths. We delved into our communication styles, our needs, and the vulnerabilities that had led to Emily's infidelity. Each session was a step toward understanding and healing, and while it was painful, I could feel the walls between us slowly beginning to crumble. One evening, after a particularly intense session, we returned home and sat on the couch together. The weight of our conversations lingered in the air, but there was also a newfound sense of connection. "I'm proud of us," I said, breaking the silence. "We're making progress even if it feels slow." Emily smiled, her eyes glistening with emotion. "I feel it too. I know it's going to take time, but I believe we can get through this together." As the days turned into weeks, I found myself reflecting on the lessons I had learned throughout this tumultuous journey. Betrayal had shattered my trust, but it had also revealed the depths of my own resilience. I had faced my anger and sought justice, but I was beginning to understand that true healing came from within, not from revenge or retribution. I still followed the developments at Marco's restaurant, and I could see that he was struggling to recover from the fallout. The citation had impacted his business, and while part of me felt a sense of satisfaction, another part of me recognized the human cost of my actions. I had sought revenge, but in doing so I had also contributed to the suffering of others. It was a complex realization, one that forced me to reevaluate my motivations. One evening I decided to reach out to Marco again. I wanted to extend an olive branch not for his sake but for mine. I needed to let go of the anger that had consumed me. I sent him a message, asking if he would be willing to meet for coffee. To my surprise, he agreed. As I sat across from Marco at the same cafe where we had met before, I felt a sense of calm wash over me. "Thanks for meeting me," I said, my voice steady. "Of course," he replied, looking more composed than our last encounter. "I wanted to see how you were doing." "I'm working on things with Emily," I admitted. "We're going to counseling and trying to rebuild our relationship." He nodded, his expression thoughtful. "I'm glad to hear that. I never wanted to come between you two, and I regret my actions deeply." "I appreciate you saying that," I responded. I wanted to let you know that I'm working on letting go of the anger I felt toward you. It's not easy, but I realize that holding onto that resentment only hurts me. Marco looked surprised but relieved. Thank you, David. I've been trying to do the same. I've learned a lot from this experience and I'm working to become a better person. As we spoke, I felt a sense of closure beginning to take shape. It wasn't about forgiving Marco. It was about freeing myself from the chains of anger that had bound me. I realized that true strength lay in the ability to move forward, to seek peace rather than revenge. When I returned home that evening, I felt lighter. Emily was waiting for me, her eyes searching mine for answers. How did it go? She asked, her voice filled with curiosity. It went well, I replied, a smile forming on my lips. I think we're both ready to let go of the past and focus on the future. Her eyes lit up with hope and I could see the love she had for me shining through. I'm so proud of you, she said, wrapping her arms around me. I believe in us, David, I really do. As I held her close, I realized that while the road ahead would still be challenging, I was no longer walking it alone. We were in this together and I had hope for our future. The love we had fought for was worth the struggle, and I was determined to rebuild the trust that had been shattered. In the end, I learned that love is not just about the absence of betrayal. It's about the courage to face the truth, to confront the pain, and to choose each other every single day. As we sat together on the couch, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. The journey had been long and tumultuous, but I was ready to embrace the next chapter of my life, one filled with love, resilience, and the promise of a brighter future. This was not the end, but the beginning of something new. And as I looked at Emily, I knew we would face it together, hand in hand.